Hello Nexters, welcome to Whiteboard Wednesday. I appear to have grown another arm with this picture, and I've also, in this thumbnail, I've got pink hair, which is a bit worrying. I'm not quite sure how that happened. Anyway, I've got another arm. Hey! Anyway, thanks for joining us today. So today we're doing metadata, demystifying metadata. Not that it's much of a mystery, but we'll have a go at it anyway. So let's get started. I've obviously, because I'm live, put my pen over here. I need my pen. Okay, so what is metadata? Everything that we touch in our world, it has metadata attached to it, whether it's on your phone or whether it's a picture or a video or anything. Pretty much everything has metadata these days. Even when you swipe your card or put your code into a machine to get your credit card details, it's metadata everywhere. So where did that all come from is the question. Well, it actually goes right back to ancient Egypt times in 2080 BC. That was a long time ago, in the Great Library of Alexandria. So all of this stuff about the conceptual origin of metadata is coming from libraries, effectively, how libraries index things. And they actually index scrolls with small labels that had the title and the subject of the scroll and the author of the work, so that you didn't have to take out the scroll and look at the whole scroll. So, you know, we're seeing that's the beginnings of how metadata actually started to exist. I think that's just an interesting anecdote, I suppose. So there's three types of metadata. There's descriptive metadata, structural metadata, and administrative metadata. I will talk first about the administrative metadata, mostly because that's very dull. And I will show you why it's very dull. So for instance, it's about data about access, permission, and licenses. It's data that we collect as the file moves through a system, for instance, and we log it and we acquire metadata, basically. So, you know, a file could be created on a certain day, and maybe it has an expiry time, like a license, okay? So if it's got a 10-day license, from the date that it's created, the system would count and count and count to the expiry day of 10. And then we'd log everyone it was shared with and everyone who edited it. And that's basically what administrative metadata does. And just the word administrative is very boring, so we're just moving along. Right. More interesting is I'm all full of words today. Descriptive metadata, which gives you additional information about a piece of data. So for argument's sake, I'll just change the colour of my pen. Should have done that before I started. If this was a photograph, let's just say it's a photograph of me here and my daughter here. She's probably causing chaos, so let's give her a stick because she likes to run around with a stick. And we've gone to, I don't know, the country park to see the ducks. So here's this picture. Now, this picture was created on my iPhone, right? So there's some metadata already. We already have that. It's on my iPhone. It was created on, let's say, the 5th of March. 5th of March, what am I talking about? Anyway, 5th of 5th, 22. And the location was the country park, right? Or it could be home, you know, wherever I was. Let's just say home. And so we've got three pieces of metadata about this particular photograph. So the descriptive metadata is just helping me understand some information about this. And you get other stuff like, you know, you get the f-stop on the camera, the focus on the camera, the latitude, the longitude of where you were when you did it. Now, what can happen here is that if I have another picture here, so if I take this away, and let's say we go back to where I was in Dubai with Mr. Roger. So Mr. Roger is very tall. Here's Mr. Roger, and here is me. I'm very short when I'm next to Mr. Roger. And here's the seaside here where we went swimming after the show, and there's some clouds in the sky, and there's the beach, you know. Not that there were any clouds in the sky. But of course now this information is irrelevant because this is a different photograph. So obviously the location of this is actually Dubai here, and the date was, when was CabSat? 17th of May. And the device, let's just say for argument's sake, it was my iPad. Don't tell Robert I took my iPad in to see anyone. Right? So different picture, the same descriptive stuff, but we've got different descriptive metadata to go with the picture. So this could go on and on and on and on, as you can imagine. So then we have structural data. So what is structural data? Well, structural data can describe data, right? I know that sounds insane, but it's data that describes data. But the easiest way for me to put this for you is to say, you know, if we look at this little chart here, for instance, I could say, let's describe a tree, okay? So we might have some leaves here, leaves, and we might have some, I don't know, some berries. And the leaves and the berries, of course, this is descriptive metadata. The leaves and the berries belong to a branch here. Here is a branch. and the branch itself belongs to the trunk. So here is the trunk, and underneath the trunk is the roots, okay? So in a way, I've taken descriptive metadata there and described a tree using structural data. Okay, so the structural data can hold the descriptive data. And this is how we can make data models that we can easily access and find things out about, which I will go into in a bit. So when we organize that data to understand it with structural data, you can think of it a bit like a spreadsheet. And we all love spreadsheets, don't we? I'll pause for effect. Okay, so here you can see the structural data is effectively the location, the device, and the created date. And then here's all the descriptive metadata that my photographs came with. I've added a couple more photographs. So there's one at home with the iPad on this date, and Dubai with the iPhone on this date, etc., etc. And when you actually do, I'm going to use a form of description called XML here. And when you show that as XML, this is what it looks like. It's, yeah. One of the reasons you want to use JSON. But never mind. This is what an XML object would look like. But rather than make it all look complicated, why don't we take a look at breaking it down into its component parts. So the structural metadata contains the descriptive metadata. So remember, location, home, device, iPad, created date, 2nd of the 5th. Okay, remember that. And then here is that object. So what we're doing is saying that this spreadsheet effectively is the object. So the object is this part here. So where we have the object here, and then we have this like little slash here, which means that the end of the object. So that's saying I'm encompassing all of this inside my object. So this is my object. And then the green here is the structural data that tells us the location, the device, and the created date. And then here is the descriptive metadata between those lines. Okay, so when you actually break the code down into what you see here, it's actually quite easy to understand. So we'll have multiple objects per photograph. And of course, you can expand this list and have all sorts of stuff. So we could have the f-stop, the focus, the latitude, the longitude, the weather at the time, if you wanted to have that all in there. And then if you want to access that, so let me just get rid of all of this. And if I wanted to access that, you could use a little line of code like this, object.location is equal to home. And the reason for that is because object dot here, so object goes in here and then comes down here and it looks for location, and there is location. So what does location equal? It equals home, right? Equally, we could change that to device and it would go down and find that, and then the answer would be iPad. So that's how you can actually access the data using this sort of structural metadata structure. Now, I mentioned XML and JSON. There are two different ways to do this. XML is, I would say, is kind of an old way to do it. It's an old HTML language. I won't bore you with the bullets, but it's not very easy to read fundamentally. And JSON is actually derived from JavaScript, so a lot of back-end stuff has been done with JavaScript now. So it's easy to grasp, and it's also much more human readable, so it's not as horrible as you saw before. And JSON really, over the years, has become far more popular. You can see this blue line here. Oh, I need to change the color of my pen again. This blue line. So this blue line here is JSON's popularity versus XML's popularity this way. So XML effectively is on the decline, and JSON is a more humanly readable, practical solution. So how do we use metadata in the broadcast industry? Well, we use a lot of metadata, and it's actually very, very important. And what I'm going to do is sort of show you this concept here, that a single piece of media, so a single video, for instance, can have plenty of different metadata types for it. Let me change my color of my pen again. So for instance, just the created date is useful for us because we know when that video was made. We can search for it on that date. We could empower it into different bookmark searches, etc., based just purely on the created date. Subtitles, for instance, can also be a type of metadata. So we have an in point for a subtitle, an out point for a subtitle, and then the body text that goes in that subtitle. That's an object, right? And you have many objects for all of the subtitles. Same with graphics. You could do that where graphics come in and out. You could use all the AI stuff, so like the object recognition, the facial recognition, the speech to text. That's all metadata. And what we do is we try to carry this with the media. And you can have two ways of doing it. You can actually embed it into the media itself, or you can run what we call a sidecar, right? And a sidecar is it's either an XML file or it is a JSON file. But that is where all of this stuff lives in here. And that's sent as what we call a sidecar file. There are standards for this flown around. there's a lot of work going on in that area. We'll yet see what the results of that will be. But I think you get a sense here of how much information a single piece of media can carry with it and how effective that will be. And just to finish off, I think what would be quite nice is to try and show you a little bit of how we deal with it at Next. So what I'm going to do is just bring up my screen here, if I can do that. This worked in rehearsals, which means it's probably not going to work now. If I click HDMI 1, does it go to HDMI 1? Do I have to double click it? Oh, hallelujah. Right, here's Next. Great, fantastic. So let's have a look at what's going on here. I've got some metadata here in this panel here. This is actually a clip from Reuters, and Reuters send you, as I said before, this sidecar of metadata that comes with it. And what happens in Next is when you drag and drop these two files into Next, Next will glue the XML data to the asset here, and we'll carry that metadata here with the asset. So even if you make a subclip of it, we will send all of the metadata. And what's interesting here is you've got things like you've got the headline. They also write you a story script, which is quite nice. So you could actually just generate a story from almost nothing. I'll just scroll down a little bit more. You've got all the digital restrictions and stuff like that. What's interesting is you also get the location here. And just to give you an idea of the power of this, again, this worked in rehearsal, but I don't know if it's going to work now. There we go, and copy. So I'm just going to paste here into the root of the search, Ypsilanti, which is the name of this piece. And now my search results here are populating based upon that search for the town. Now what's interesting is not only do we get this video and the subclips of this video, we also got any still images of this video, and also we've got the script. So where the Ypsilanti has been mentioned in the script, we've indexed the script. So basically the system will go through the script and find every single word and index it for search. So if it finds it in the script as well, we've also got it here. So the power of metadata here is not only unlocking where the content is, it's also unlocking other things like the scripts and stuff like that. We can also search in Next, we can also search the subtitles and the graphics, so the lower thirds, if you want to find out if you had a guess before. So there's a really powerful use of metadata there. The other thing we can do is when you start getting into the AI stuff, let me just bring this a little bit wider. So here, what I've got is a storyboard with lots of pipelines, and in each pipeline, the facial recognition, this is Vladimir Putin, Joe Biden, Boris Johnson, Zelensky, the Pope, Queen Elizabeth II. And what we end up with here is that every time a facial recognition hit is on one of these people, they're automatically added to each of these pipelines. And then these pipelines themselves are actually searchable. So we can search the metadata of this stuff here. So if we search for Ukraine, for instance, then we only get clips that are relative to that search term in here, and we exclude all the other clips indeed. So, for instance, Elizabeth II pipeline here is completely empty because there's no relationship in her metadata to the search term. Okay. And another way that can be useful is when you're talking about graphic content. So how do you filter out graphic content? So in here we look at the speech to text that's come from the AI, and we look for swear words, for instance. So we make a search that looks for swear words, and if it finds a hit, it will put it in the profanity detect pipeline here. Equally, the nudity detect and the violence detect. So if it sees things like, a fight or gun or blood or something like that, it will add it to this, and also skin and things like that, it will add it to there. And what this is just a way of being able to see what you've got in the system and what could potentially be dangerous to air. So the other thing we do is also anything that has the word graphic content is automatically put into here. And then what a user can do is take a video of something and just drop it into the mark with warning section here, and then we will mark these as being unsafe content in the system. So we automatically we're doing a manual test to make sure that this is unsafe, and then everyone in the system can see that it has a tag for unsafe content, which has been driven by a process using the AI engines in there. So that's a little brief look at how we use metadata in Next and how we can use metadata in the broadcast industry today. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's been fun to give my Whiteboard Wednesdays out. We'll be back next week because we're doing social media next week, so that should be quite exciting. So I look forward to seeing you then. Have a great rest of the week.